We're at the new frontier of what this is. It used to be considered completely like superfluous. Medicine still poo-poos the fascia. They're like, it's just stuffing. It's just connective tissue. They want to get to the heart and the lungs and they want to jump in. And so the medical community is still anti-fascial research. Just in the last 20 years has there been like deep science research on this thing. And so what I tell people who end up finding me, I end up being the end of a long road of just like knocking down these doors. It was my story, right? Like just tell me something. I want an answer. I need a solution. I can't live like this, and nothing helps. And so what I tell people is it's like fascia is doing for our health and wellness as an answer, as a solution, as a source, kind of like what the flat world, round world view was. It's like, it's not what you're thinking. It's the opposite. Include fascia in the conversation. Include it in your search online for professionals. Include it because I guarantee it's somewhere involved because it's your connective tissue.
Anna Rahe, we're talking in the pregame. We're both two ADHD people talking about entrepreneurship and our mutual cousin of mine, Emmy Rossum, story for a different time. And already kinship, she's cerebral like I am, she's in her beautiful, loft up in, was it Colorado? Where are you at?
Boulder, Colorado.
Born and raised.
I'm a born and raised girl at Boulder.
Well, that's what we're going to do. Well, let's go back to the origin. Let's find out. You're from Colorado. You're speaking of precocious, she's a little precocious, you're self-proclaimed, right?
I talk about that a lot. I'm a precocious rogue girl.
Yeah, good.
Really fit into a road.
Yeah,
road less traveled.
Yeah, good. Let's go back. Like, what did your mom and dad do for a living? Let's try to figure out the algorithm of you as we progress and find out more what you do, and then we'll get into some skill set afterwards for some fun.
Nice. I can do that. I'll be succinct. I was born and raised Boulder, Colorado. My dad was originally a professor at CU, Colorado University. My mom got her master's degree. So they were highly educated, kind of intellectual people. It wasn't until like the early 80s that my dad's like, I don't really like teaching. He was an economist. And he's like, I really like real estate. And so he, went off and did his own thing after getting all his education. And I was the second eldest of 4 girls. And so that kind of also sets you up, birth order really influences stuff. And I ended up being really the only sister that was big into entrepreneurship. I wanted to start my business at 18. I, was making logos and having business cards and trying to sell things. And, I just really liked autonomy, and it kind of fit my nature because I just never really fit in. I was a very good kid, but I was still somehow the black sheep of the family a little bit, like kind of just, like I said, always taking the road less traveled. I really questioned people's ideas and didn't just buy in. And I'd always kind of push the envelope. I think that really annoyed my dad, who was trying to raise a certain type of woman. He was actually not trying to make us like, he empowered women, but I think he wanted a, highly moral, ethical, religious woman. And I was like, maybe I will smoke, or maybe I'm gonna go and, have sex before I'm married. I don't know. It was just, I may want to try these things. And so I moved out when I was 18. I headed to San Francisco to pursue a career in dancing. I wanted to be a dancer. And then I hit this really major roadblock where my body started flaring up with like significant pain and restriction and health complications that an 18-year-old shouldn't have, that made me feel like I was 80. And that's no hyperbole. I literally would like have digestive issues, couldn't sleep, had like lung and respiratory problems. And I kept going to these professionals and trying to ask, like, why can't I run up the hill one day and then 3 days later I feel like a 10-pack a day smoker? And why? Okay.
Let me ask you a question, because there's a reason why. Was it like a myositis kind of thing where there's constant pain, never going away, or what, inflammation? What was it diagnosed with?
So no one could diagnose it. And this is part of my story, is that every single person was like, oh, the gastroenterologist is like, well, we did your colonoscopy and we did your poop scores and find out all this internal stuff going on. And they're like, but that's not related to your lungs at all. And I'm like, but when I can't breathe, I start having problems with my digestion. And they're like, there's no similarities. And so cut to, I had been a Pilates teacher. I had studied enough anatomy. I had taken a workshop at one point in my training in fascia. And fascia, it turns out that it's this connective tissue system that exists perforating everywhere in the body. It serves so many functions in our physiological health and our brain health, our cognitive health. And it's this really refined body organ that serves all these purposes. And cut to 25 years later, I've done this deep super dive into fascia and what it was doing. And it wasn't a diagnosis. Fascia doesn't really diagnose. It doesn't fit into our Western medicine perspective very much because it's all about connection. And so Western medicine is all about narrowing the aperture and being like, I see that this little thing, this is what's wrong. And then it's like, okay, well, maybe that's just a symptom of a bigger source. And fascia does the opposite. It opens the aperture and it starts looking. It's like, oh, when this part of my tissue is unhealthy, you can experience it like brain fog, hormonal depression, headaches, metastasis of cancer. It starts being a grid in terms of expanding consciousness and expanding things rather than contracting into rigid ways of binary thinking. And so I was kind of what drove me into it, I think, was just this desire to have a body that would allow me to do the art and live this life that I wanted to. And it ended up becoming my life work because no one else was really doing this kind of work. And I studied fascia with manual therapists. That's mostly until the recent decade. Most people were like massage therapists and they'd work it out and stretch it and open it up. And, but it would always go back because the greatest influence on fascia is your movement. And so that's what I do. And we can talk more about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, but that's my story in general is I was just driven to create a system where I could deliver this body health, wellness, life-changing technology that's not existent in a lot of the stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of evolved.
I just so happen to be going through a journey right now since February. My wife she was working out one day and within a 48-hour period, she had pain that hasn't stopped since February. Tons of tests. She's actually just got a scan today. She's getting a muscle biopsy next week. And they think she has myositis, which I mentioned before. They did the throwaway. You have fibromyalgia.
That's right.
It's a throwaway thing. She started taking this medication for it. It totally screwed her up. Then she finally went off of it. This has been since February. She's going through this thing. She's very much a Western doctor. She listens to them. She will not. And I'm like, look, let's throw out all the I'm like, throw out all the chemicals and we're going to macro, but we're going to go on a all natural diet. We're going to work out 7 days. She's like, I can't even move. How am I going to work out? I'm like, we got to change everything, and she's like, calm down. I'm going to just listen to my doctors. So this fascia, is it applicable, from a standpoint, because I'm ready to have her call you after this. Have
her call me. I could try. Yeah. I mean, look, here's the deal. I tell people that it's this really, we're at the new frontier of what this is. It used to be considered completely superfluous. Medicine still poo-poos the fascia. They're like, it's just stuffing. It's just connective tissue. They want to get to the heart and the lungs and they want to jump in. And so the medical community is still kind of anti-fascial research. Just in the last 20 years has there been deep science research on this thing. And so what I tell people who end up finding me, I end up being the end of a long road, like your sweet wife. I'm so sorry, because that's a very, I hate to say it, a common story of just knocking down these doors. It was my story, right? Just tell me something. I want an answer. I need a solution. I can't live like this, and nothing helps. And so what I tell people is it's fascia is doing for our health and wellness as an answer, as a solution, as a source, kind of like what the flat world, round world view was. It's not what you're thinking. It's the opposite. It is not the road that you're taking. It's something you've never even heard of before, which has been a hard thing for my business. Someone asked me the other day, they're like, how is it that you started a business and nobody knows what you're selling? No one, you have to educate the consumer. And I'm like, really good point. But this is the point, is that people need to know, your wife needs to know that the world isn't flat, that there's this new world view that actually just opens aperture, that would give her more information, maybe even more questions, which is good, rather than fewer answers. right? And so I'm guessing, I tell people, if you have these symptoms and something and your Western approach is not working, include fascia in the conversation, include it in your search online for professionals, include it, because I guarantee it's somewhere involved because it's your connective tissue. It is wrapping around every single system you have, your muscles and your bones, your lymphatics, your endocrine system, your vital organs, your viscera and this is why my symptoms were so diverse and confusing, because I'm like, this doesn't, they feel connected, but what connects it? And I didn't really know until fascia. So I would happily talk to your wife and just see if there's anything else that I could offer, because I think that that's a really viable solution.
Yeah. So let's go into your journey. So you have this pain, you have these symptoms, and how do you navigate yourself towards a better road, so to speak, on what was your journey like?
Yeah. So my pain was kind of like systemic, right? Even into my guts and even into my brain and and it was the connective tissue, but you have to understand how fascia works, and that fascia, I don't want to go into the deep science on your entrepreneurial podcast because that could be confusing, but
we can do anything here. This is fun stuff.
It's interesting. And so fascia is a sensory organ, in the fact that it has 7 times now, they're updating this information all the time, as many sensors as any other body tissue. What that means is that layered into your muscles, into your bones, into everything, there's these listeners, these like receptors that are calculating chemicals, light, heat, weight, and it's constantly listening and modulating your physiological response to this input. And fascia is the major system, the primary system that is feeling, listening, sensing, and communicating to the brain. When you have these sensors, there's a type of sensor called a nociceptor or nociceptor, and it is what is telling the body there is toxins in your system. And what's interesting is it's called an open-end listener. It's not like allocated towards chemical or towards light or towards mechanical load like in a muscle. It's open-ended, and it's constantly listening. And if it's constantly being congested with toxic information, it tends to turn into a nociceptor, meaning that it's reporting pain when there really isn't any, or it will start telling you that there's acute feedback. And what it's trying to tell you is, I need help distributing this toxin, whatever it is, and get it moving out. So it starts really at the musculoskeletal level. And I can go into this whole thing, but the idea is that most people who accumulate enough toxic information in their system, in the connective tissue system, will start to have flare-ups that are like autoimmune-like, and be able to, and it overwhelms the system. The system can't compute, and it literally, the person needs to learn how to it's not decompress, but exfoliate this noise from their system. And it requires neurological programming, and they work together. So it's not like a separate thing. But so I found out very early that if I rolled on rollers, I kind of got some of my pain gone, but it didn't do much. And then I would lay on these hard balls and I'd feel this spread, this kind of like opening or a melting, sometimes people will call it. And I would do that every night to try to release my pain. The problem is that every night I'd have to do it. It's almost like I was dependent on that to have any type of reprieve. So one night in general, I was laying on my reformer as a Pilates teacher in my studio apartment in San Francisco. And I was like, what if I could make that spreading happen on purpose? Instead of me laying here and trying to relax, as soon as I get up and go to a dance class, my muscles are completely fucked up. And if I try to go out and do my run, my lungs close down. And I was like, I need something that is sustainable and permanent. So that's kind of what built this thing, is that I discovered that fascia has the ability to contract and expand on purpose, kind of the way a muscle contracts and expands. It's a more subtle experience. It is not as dominant, like you'd think about a muscle as having 9 pounds of pull per square inch. Fascia has 1.5 pounds. So it's very light and faint. Lots of people can't feel it at first, so you have to teach them how to do this. But what the benefit is that I started noticing that if I moved my fascia in certain ways while I was exercising or doing dance or living my life, regular bouts of this type of fascial animation, it's called, I would not accumulate the pain that I'd have to get rid of by rolling out. So the idea is that if you want to lose weight, let's take an analogy that your listener might understand. I want to lose some weight. It's an equation. You have to eliminate the food that is taking you over your caloric threshold. Okay. It's not enough just to go out and exercise to try to burn the calories. You literally have to take it out. And the same thing is for fascia. Fascia is very responsive to load. Okay. Load is when you lift up your child, carry heavy boxes, pick up weights. Your wife was working out when this happened, which is also an interesting trigger for me.
A real other thing is I'm just dying to know real quick.
Totally.
During this time, our 18-year-old daughter, just before she turns 18, they're having a dickens of a time. They were arguing like crazy. Nothing drastic, but they the butting heads, and she's the oldest. So this is the first time my wife is dealing with this, and she was taking it hard, they crying bouts and arguing with each other. Yes. And they say fibromyalgia is triggered by some emotional traumatic event. I'm wondering, but it's not fibromyalgia, they say.
I know.
And Peter Frampton has this myositis, and they think it's that. Do you think that is that how some of this is triggered? Is how yours was triggered by a traumatic event, or what?
So let's go in and look at this.
What do we say about that?
Fascia is your body's smart grid. Okay, just like the smart grid on the planet, it is regulating all kinds of input energy, and it modulates it. So you take high voltage energy from outside, lifting, to the small physiological loading inside, like you have a stressful experience. And fascia is on the back end, flexing and moving the energy about your system with it's an electrohydraulic system, which we can get to in a minute. And so when you have an emotional experience, it's called chemical loading. Your body puts together a hormone cocktail of experience. This many shots of vermouth, this many shots of noradrenaline, this kind of cortisol, this shakes it up and sends it through your tissues. And then your tissues have to be like, I got to get this out of my system. I have to metabolize that, or it sits as toxic waste in your tissues. And so what ends up happening is that people do not create enough movement in their lives and the right type of movement. Right? Then it comes down to the quality versus quantity, which we can go into talking about exercise and working out, because that's not considered movement to fascia. The kind of movement that is necessary to keep it healthy. Okay. Not all good food is good for you. Not all movement and exercise is good for you, period. And so a lot of times we are exercising thinking we're doing something good, and it's loading the tissue poorly. So this comes down to this basic, very primitive biology that happens in the body, that once your tissues have this chemical in it, if it is not metabolized well, and if it doesn't come out into movement, that can be emotional release, that can be physical release. But unless that happens, that's literally what takes those sensors I was talking about and overstimulates them. And if you keep ordering the same cocktail over and over and over again, then you're going to have these surges in specific places. This is where low back pain comes in. It's a flow field in the fascial progression for your cortisol and your adrenal secretions that come from your upper back, like right at your bra line, a woman's bra line. So your fascia is busy modulating chemical loads, right? That come from the psychology and the experiences you have, and the physical mechanical loads. There's no difference. There's some interesting research from a sociologist. What's her name? I'm not going to come up with it without slowing down the conversation, but Susan Cuddy, something Cuddy. And she proposed maybe a decade ago, that you can do these power stances where if you are looking for confidence going into an interview, or if you are, and she watched physical performance, like the athlete who comes across the finish line. Why do they all throw up their arms? What is that? Because it's the second side in our physiology of what's happening in fascia. Okay. So when we start looking at how our body postures are created by our emotional states and our movements are directed by the same, all of a sudden we can kind of get this deeper understanding of how intricately our movement is related to our total body health. It's not like diet and exercise, this binary, really small world view. And so the body will literally produce a chemical that does a certain physical gesture in your body. And a lot of times we don't actually access enough wide ranges. You know how like most people eat really narrow diets, like they only eat 3 or 4, vegetables and only a couple different proteins. And we do the same thing in movement. I do crunches, I do leg lifts, I do, shoulder presses. And it's like, but what about spinning? What about circling the arm? What about rotating the spine? And those are equivalent to like nutritional needs that actually detoxify the fascial environment. It's called your fascial biome inside your body.
All this makes a lot of sense because if you study NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and your physiology and how that works with the chemicals that are being produced in your body, and how the recipe of your physiology and your focus and your words and how that, creates a recipe towards, your nervous system. All this makes sense to me. I love all this
all
stuff.
Connected. Yeah, you have a really good mind for this. I can tell that sometimes I think people who interview me are like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to I'm like,
no, but it's not rocket science. It's not, it makes perfect sense. Your body, of course, is secreting a chemical towards when you're experiencing something emotional. That's right. They recruit. It's almost like how they measure a woman's and a man's mind when they're with megahertz, and how they light up differently. It's the same kind of thing. You secrete different chemicals for different emotions, I'm sure. Right.
That's right. And people have their personalities would have dependencies on certain ones and not others. And then that also comes down to like the condition and the genetics of your fascia. Some people's fascia is way more susceptible to toxic levels. It's almost like, some even pro athletes have higher cholesterol, even though they're working out all the time because they have a genetic predisposition. And so there are people who have more sensitive systems and fascial genetic things. What type of, percentages of collagen to elastin, different types of hydration, what's in the tissues. And so that composition can also make some people totally prone, right, to more issues with their fascia. And I think that I don't know what it is that your wife, what was, they said it was what?
Well, it's
colitis
with the process of elimination at this point. They're saying, look, it's not this, it's not that, it's not this, and they say that, Peter Frampton, he's like the biggest person that has myositis. And there's 4 different types of myositis. Does
it have to do with the muscles or does it have to do with myelin?
They believe it's muscle and nerve. Well, she took a nerve test. It's more muscle and I'm still finding out more about it, because we really don't know for sure but they're gravitating towards something that's called myositis. And they say there's no cure for it. It's an autoimmune type of thing. And I know, I hear you. You're right. So like she's saying, no, yeah, right. There's got to be, so this is where let's talk about some of the particular action items, because we're not going to say that my wife has this. Let's keep it open. But what are some of the actions that you've had results specifically to where you said, okay, well, there's different, I can probably, foresee you saying there's different types of scenarios. Yeah. But give us some case studies, a little bit of like situations, because this is totally fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. So we can do case studies. I think the other thing that you were maybe that's inside of that kind of question is like, what are the things that you can do? Is that kind of what you're like that?
Yeah, I'm a guy. I want to fix things.
That's right. I like fixing things too. Yeah. I am so down. Okay. So here's the deal. This is what I was going to say about your wife and for people who are listening that are having problems and or are just going to entertain this as a, preventative care. Like we need to think about this in preventative care, which is sometimes a switch goes off in the body and we do get something that's non-curable, right? But then it becomes about, do you have these massive skills, these massive, not meaning hard to learn, massive meaning like super impactful, that can actually help you live with this condition. I work a lot with rheumatoid arthritis victims. That's not going away, right? That's something that is in you. And so then all of a sudden, what do you need? And things like, people with MS that I work with, they shouldn't take their body temperature super high. Well, we still need to get them, movement and get them the things that they need, but their body temperature shouldn't be elevated because it affects the way that the myelin behaves. So When I go into people's actual bodies, it's like what's so amazing about fascia is that what is good for fascia is literally the same thing that is good for all of these conditions. It's a source material, right? So if you learn basic things about fascia and how it moves, how it animates, it will naturally decrease most of the symptoms in what your wife is experiencing. So that's kind of coming back to this conversation, and I won't go too deep into it, but it's like, we don't unknowingly, we load our bodies not knowing what the outcome is. We don't even know what fascia is, then how it behaves, then how it responds to our own internal stresses, external loads. And so we go about our lives unaware that we're doing things that are actually hurting us rather than helping us. And so the first thing that people need to know is that fascia redefines the body and takes it from a solid to a fluid. Okay, your body is, we know, like 70% water, but fascia is actually 70% water. And on the molecular level, our bodies are 99% water in the molecule. So you start looking at that means to people that we need to be in a fluid state to be healthy rather than a solid state. But if you look at all of our approaches to life and our responses to stress is freeze, tighten, restrict, get tighter abs, get stronger muscles. Everything's about pulling to core. Everything is antithetical to being a fluid, soft, open, hydrated person. And that will dry, brittle fascia squeezes nerves, restricts blood flow, increases inflammation inside the body, taxes the nervous system, oversensitizes the interoception inside of you. And so what fascia wants is, I need to be hydrated. And most people over the age of 15 have started to develop what's called glycation. It's an oxidative stress that lives inside of your tissues. It's a natural process of aging, but our lifestyles actually rapidly increase this. And our lifestyles, meaning sedentary, our movement habits, as well as our psychological habits, are completely restricted and completely locked down and completely detached. And so fascia is like, yeah, I am not able to glide. I am not able to move. I am not able to hydrate. Think about fascia a little bit like a sponge, and it needs to squeeze and it needs to expand. You are more tubes than sticks. We always think about sticks and pulleys as we move, but fascia redefines that. I won't go into the cellular structure of fascia, but it's a tube, and it creates tubes in your arms. And tubes are three-dimensional structures to move water. And so our movements need to be more hydraulic in nature. Our mechanics need to be hydraulic and not rigid and solid mechanics. Okay. And that changes how we approach our movement. Is we need to keep fascia dried. For the listener who needs to picture this, fascia looks like a gooey gel spider web that's all over under your skin. It's crystal, like it's like glistening and smooth, and it's water and fibers. And so when you are dry, it's almost like having ramen noodles for your tissue. And you need to add this very specific type of tissue animation movement that elicits fascia's response to kind of like separate, like hot water on ramen. Then the noodles soften. Then they get to separate. Then they get to individuate and pull and lengthen. And so we have to start to move better. We've like whittled down our expectations of physical movement in our lives to counting steps, having your watch, not even your brain. You're so detached from your body that you're going to have your watch count your steps. And then you're like, I feel accomplished. I got 12,000 steps today. And you're like, that is so anorexic in movement terms. That is not providing anything. Number one, then we go out and binge one big workout meal. We're like, oh, I got to go get my workout on 60 minutes. I'm going to burn through this. And we literally burn and scorch our fascia, which also adds fibrosis, dehydration, rigidity. So there's these three principles that fascia wants. One is that squeezing of the sponge. It's called compression. The other is traction, a pulling apart, like the spaghetti and the ramen noodles being individuated. And then there's rotation, Another image for the listener is that washing your fascia daily is very similar to taking a hand wash garment in a tub of water. You dunk it in there. That's compression. You loosens the fibers. You pull the sweater up and all the water tractions down and pulls dirt out. And then you wring it out and it exfoliates the toxins. If you look at your human motion, you need to have all three of these. Biomechanically, everything is either flexion, extension, or rotation. And we do mostly flexion, sitting at our computers, sitting down pushing stress into our adrenal glands and our backs, rigid thinking, rigid ab work. And we hardly ever extend our spine, which actually turns on the parasympathetic de-stress response. When you arch your back, if you stick out your ribs, when you yawn and you open your chest, it's that cutty physical telling you what your physiological state should be, right? And so you want to extend your spine and then you want to rotate it. And so this is what I tell people. Fascia does not like binge eating or binge movement. It wants to be microdosed every hour on the hour. And so you have to look around your life and make the world your jungle gym. Just like when you were a kid, you don't go to a gym for 60 minutes. No one has time. You're at your office. You wake up and I will describe it in your morning routine. Go to your kitchen sink. Take your toes and put it against the baseboard of your sink. Grab onto the edge of your sink. Pull your butt back like you're about to water ski. This is called traction. Then you're going to drop your butt into a primal squat, one of the most essential movements that we have completely taken out of our nutritional movement. Primal squat. Pull back again, straighten your legs, then roll up and arch like you're doing a cobra against your sink. Your hands are on the surface and you put your nipples to the ceiling. And you're going to do that action 5 times. You pull back, you bend your knees to primal squat, pull back, and come up and arch. And if you think about that in your brain, what that looks like, it's literally like a syringe pushing and pulling life back into you. Then after you've done that 4 or 5 times, take your arms out in your kitchen and literally just act like a summer sprinkler and try to rotate around and let your arms hit you and just turn your spine as much as you can to each side. Do it 6 times, walk away, go on with your day. Within an hour, your fascia should give you a reflex. It should say, I need something. I need to yawn. I need to drink. I need to move. You have a reflex in fascia that tells you that you need to move. And we're going to stimulate that. So then you're at your office and you go to the bathroom and you are about to wash your hands. Do the same thing at your sink in the bathroom. You go to have lunch and you're going to go to the park. Pull off of a bark bench. You go and park your car to pick up your kids and there's a chain link fence at the school. You do the same thing. And so all of a sudden your body is with you. You are living embodied and you're starting to live really from the nutrient information that your body is needing. And that's what fascia is asking, is that I need to be moved all the time. Like I'm a snow globe. And just come and shake me a couple times and then the fascia flurries. But if you sit and stress and stew and your fascia literally locks down and gets glycation, what I was talking about. It's like a sticky honey, a rigid state.
Meet the Bolo Pack, the ultimate travel companion that transforms into a hammock, a pop-up tent, and even a cooler. Whether you're hiking, camping, or chilling at the beach, the Bolo Pack has you covered. First up, the Bolo Pack is a sleek, compact backpack, perfect for day trips or long adventures. Need a break? With a simple pull, the Bolo Pack transforms into a relaxing hammock, perfect for catching your breath during hikes. Planning to spend the night? The Bolo Pack also converts into a pop-up tent, giving you shelter wherever you go. And the best part? The Bolo Pack doubles as a cooler, keeping your food and drinks fresh for hours. Let me show you how easy it is to switch between modes. First, the hammock. Just a few simple steps, and you're ready to relax. Next, the pop-up tent for quick shelter setup. And finally, the cooler function, ensuring you stay refreshed on the go. From day hikes to weekend getaways, the Bolo Pack adapts to your needs. Whether you're chilling, camping, or keeping your snacks cool, ready to upgrade your travel game? Get your Bolo Pack today and take your adventures to the next level. Link in the description.
Wow. I've done competently and unconsciously. I've done this
Good.
at the office and this, and sometimes I'll work at the house or at the office, and I choose to, because I got a pull up bar here. I'll do like, I'll stretch, and then I got a windowsill behind me at the office, and I'll do that, and I'll have the Veriflex, desk, and I'm start doing all these things because I'm like, I just want to be able to stretch and do these things, and then I find myself sometimes I will not do them, but let's say I'll do a 2-hour workout, and I feel better doing all of it in one day. I love my 2-hour workouts, but if I had to choose one, now that I think about it, those days, because I'll sit there often and say, you know what, Mike, you need to do more of this when you're at the house, working as well, because I'm doing these movements and I feel not stale.
That's right. That's a great word.
And I think that it's just the way you phrase that, it's just not moving. It's just not releasing the lactic acid or whatever's in there. There's got to be something else and it is this, I will take my foot and I'll rest it on the back of this windowsill. And then I will lean up against the desk. So my groin is stretched, my chest is out, and I'm doing this. This is unconscious and conscious.
Good. Oh my gosh.
And I'm doing this throughout the day, and that's at the office just because I have this windowsill behind me. But but I feel better because I'm half of the week I'll work at the office, other half at the house. And I swear to God, I'm like, I got to find a way to do this at the house because
they created at your house. That's exactly right. It's kind of funny because I feel like back to this ADHD thing. Mm-hmm. ADHD people have such an output of neurological energy that they tend to want to move more because it helps them think. And this isn't by chance. Yeah. This is literally that fascia and the nervous system are almost holographic information partners. And so when your brain is overactive, it needs to come out the energetic modulator of energy in through your fascia. And so when you are wanting to do that and craving that, it's a very natural physiological response to overproduction of mental energy. And so that is common amongst ADD people, but a lot of people need to actually implement that, and they would start having a similar reflex, not the same impetus, but a similar reflex, right? It's not their brains that are hyper needing it. It's that they will be told in their brain by this area. It's called the insula. The fascia feeds the insula and says, this is a reflex. It's your sex reflex, your thirst reflex, your hunger reflex, all go to the same area. And fascia says, fucking move. You gotta fucking fluff me. You gotta shake the snow globe. And so you just have that deeper, like, physiological connection, which is fascinating. It's so good. And
where does the endorphins and the lymphatic fluid play a part of this? Because I feel my dopamine drop, if I'm sedentary too much. And because first of all, I was loosely diagnosed as an adult with this ADHD. Okay? I was like, screw you that. And then they showed me everything. And I'm like, oh my God, I check every single box. And then, and then if I they say and I'm sure this is for anybody, but it seems really works for me. And then if I'm sedentary for an hour, get up and do 30 jumping jacks. And then I'm like, oh my God, yeah, I'm able to function a little better here.
Right. So I don't know all of the biochem. I'm not a biochem major. In fact, I never took chemistry. I've learned most of my chemistry through just, doing what I do and looking it up and trying to find an answer. But I will say that the fascia is linked in deeply to your endorphin system, just like your muscular skeletal system is linked into your adrenal system. Okay. So think about your muscles and bones as your getaway car. Okay. When you, in the olden days, in primal life, saw a lion and you needed to get away, you secrete all these chemicals through your physiology. It brings the horses on and you need to get out. It's a getaway car. What's happening is that most people live in that and they actually exist in this total adrenal state. Then they're like, I need to go work it off. I need to go burn my day off. And they go and burn their adrenals even further. What they're really craving is the antidote, which is the endorphin release, which you can get if you are doing a repetitive motions that are mantratic in their nature for long periods of time. That's what a runner's high is, right? Is that you're initiating endorphin response. Well, you can cut to the chase and not run for 2 hours to get it if you just know how to work with your fascia. All of a sudden, you are stretching. So stretching is one of the things that really activates fascia, right? Because it's pulling length away from the constantly contracted muscular state that's the getaway car. So a lot of times people will feel that breath. And my question to you, I don't know the answer of like, if you jump up and down 10 times, you're probably not like secreting your adrenals too much. I don't know if you're taxing into the endorphin. It could just be the simple exchange of cellular motion, like the snow globe, that actually changes and resets your neurological response, right? The dopamine levels, because movement does. It's, your movement affects your chemistry set, and your chemistry set affects your fascia, which is your motion. Yeah. So I think it's kind of either. Is that kind of an answer?
It does. What's happening here right now? Two ADHD people, just swimming like clownfish in a sea anemone. It's like because screw the structure that I usually go through on my podcast. It's like this is so fun because we're going off, but this is valuable. Yeah. So what about? Let me left field questions because this is a good subject. And I think a lot pliable for a lot of people. Recently got into, and I haven't done it in a week. I need to do it. Cold plunging. You have anything to say about that?
That's really funny. I never want to do it. I'm not a huge fan of being cold. I hate it. Living in Colorado was a big stretch for me coming back to Colorado.
But let's say you want to get ready for the workout. People say do it after the workout.
I think it feels good. It's totally endorphin related, right? Like they're trying to, stimulate deep, like basic brain, basal ganglia, like responses. And it's supposed to shock your system to be able to, kind of like reset you. I think that's kind of the thing. And I think what I've learned about fascia from a philosophical perspective is that I think everything in moderation is good. Like do it. Do cold plunging. It's supposed to be really good for like producing brown fat versus white fat, and that it peaks your metabolic activities. Like I said, I'm not really a biochem major. I probably should learn a little bit more. I asked my internist the other day about it, and she looked at me like I was a freak of nature. She's like, none of my patients ever asked me this, and I'm like, You're welcome. You're welcome. So I think that do it. I just think that what we do in this world, in our society, in our, modern age is so imbalanced. We just take everything to the extreme. If it's good for you, then if I do it a lot, it's even better for me. And it's like, no. Right? Like the Vikings were taking cold plunges because they had no hot running water. And they didn't do it every single day before they wake up to go out and surf. Right? Like they are doing it once a week so they can clean themselves. And it's actually a relaxing thing, not I have to just train my brain to overcome this. And, Hoffman or Hoffweiser, what's his name? He's incredible. I think what he does is crazy, but I'm also like, okay, just moderation. That's all I'm going to say.
Right.
Just moderation.
Let's get into, the fascia and the movement, and it sounds almost like maybe Pilates would be closest to a great thing. I've never done it, but I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, that looks great. That looks great. Are there certain types of exercises, or when somebody comes to you and say, we're going to start here, and then we're going to go get into all this, what does that look like specifically, the nuts and bolts of that?
Okay, so my one answer to that is that there's not a good or bad type of exercise. What's problematic is that we use poor biomechanics. Okay, so you could be I was a great Pilates teacher, but I was using solid mechanics. If you ever studied physics, it was like close your ribs, tighten your core, lock down your lats, pull them back and down, like all of these very structurally rigid movements. You will find that in yoga. You'll find that in Pilates. You will find that in Taekwondo. You will find that in, cross conditioning drives me nuts when I watch gymnasts at the Olympics. I'm like, you could have so much more if you would stop training in a biomechanical model that is not facilitating the best movement. Anyway, so what I tell people is that you really want to look for diversity of movement, right? Like, number one, this core does not exist in your abdomen. The core runs the entire length of your central nervous system, which is your spine. And so all of a sudden you'd redefine core and you're like, I can't just tighten my abs and it pulls my ribs down and it vices my organs. I actually have to lift my rib cage. There's this fascinating book that was written by this guy who used to be in prison, and he wrote this like workout book because in prison you don't have hardly anything to do. So he made workouts that he could do inside his cell.
Yeah.
And one of the things he talks about in the book, it's just fascinating. He's like, we do not twist our spines enough. We don't do it. And all of his core work was never crunches. He told the history of how a crunch came about, which is basically muscle builders wanted to just define the rectus abdominis. It's the area on your stomach that goes from your sternum to your pubic bone. It's the most superficial muscle grouping that gives you a six pack.
Yeah.
And they would put on all this muscle mass to try to like cut and then, lean down, and they would lose some of their definition. So the crunch came about because people were trying to just access 30-degree range of motion for your abs. But that got to talk about going to the extreme. That has taken over our entire workout philosophy that everybody does crunches. It's the worst thing for your physiology, your chemical states, and it's the worst thing for your muscular skeletal system. It totally wreaks havoc on lumbar spines, blowing out discs, hurting our cervical spine. And it's like, but everybody teaches it. So you can't say Pilates is good or yoga is bad. It's like they're all teaching these really dangerous, bad principles that aren't supplying the body with the right thing. So you have to have a suspension in your body. Nobody works for suspension. That's like the anti-gravity. That is levity that fights gravity. Okay. And yet we do all of our moves that add weight to gravity. So you should be stretching more. Even if you're loading your muscles with weight, you should be stretching the line. So here's a principle that fascia teaches. Fascia says, I'm holding 10 pounds or 20 pounds of a dumbbell in my arms. Fascia says I need to stretch to the point of the strain. Instead, muscles say I'm going to pull back and shorten against the strain, right? That's how I'm going to hold strength, is I'm going to pull against it. Well, that's damaging to fascia. Fascia needs to run the energy to the source, and it actually gets stronger the longer it gets. It has 10,000 times the tensile strength of a muscle. And what that means is that fascia is what is actually holding your body's strength and holding it together, not your muscles. You don't need to tighten your muscles to get strong. You can be ridiculously strong if you tap into the fascial response. So what people need to think about, I think, is this. Think about your movement the way you think about food. Simple principles of make as many diverse ranges of motion as possible. And what that doesn't even mean something to most people. They're like, I don't know. I'm just supposed to put my feet here, take my dumbbells, hold tight in my abs, and do this a million times, right? That's kind of like the I am man approach to movement, rather than like, let's make this a little bit more like nuanced, a little more scientifically available and specifically related to what we're doing. That means you have to create suspension. And you want those three things I told you kind of back in the day of like compression, traction, and rotation. Those are movements, but then don't do them. Can I show? Do you ever do the videos for your people?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to show you a couple samples here, and then people can kind of follow along.
Yeah.
So, for example, we don't hold a position and tighten tone around okay? This is very backwards.
Yeah.
What fascia says, it's like, I have to do the largest range of motion I humanly can and try to stretch and pull. I need to be able to traction and load. And when I load, I don't tighten my abs. Don't tighten your abs. Let the fascia hold you and get longer. The longer I work, the stronger I get, right? So you look at like, we need to be able to go down. This is a huge range of motion, and we need to go up. This is the swing from the trees, go around the campfire.
Yeah.
Rotate and throw your spear. That's a good way to think about those three ranges of motion, right? Swing from the trees, down at the campfire, throwing your spear. And these ranges of motion are huge, right? Like karate kicks, legs that lift up. Don't keep your feet planted and lock your kinetic chain. They kind of miss a lot of they don't supply the same nutrition. And this is what I was going to say to the idea of like, you need vitamin C, vitamin K, vitamin A, and you need these in proportions. You need to rotate, jump, spin, swing. Like pendular swinging is huge that no one does. In the olden days, back in the Victorian era, they had what were called Indian clubs, and they were really used to create pendular swing. And they thought that that was a lot of the cure and the physicality for lymph, and it is. So if you look at our videos, we have some of that. I only learned about it after, but that would be a nutritional element. right? So for the listener, think about your movement like vitamins. Are you only doing vitamin C? Well, then you're probably malnourished in other ways. And if you're only getting, too much vitamin A is toxic because it digests differently than water soluble vitamins, right? So we just need to start changing our understanding and our approach to movement in general, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about workout, count my calories, get lean. It's very much nuanced, like fat, like the body needs the mind, back to ADHD, needs movement, like rich, dense, nutritional movement that makes your body feel good, and movement that is good for you feels good. Okay. And so you need to get that feeling. And I think that it's most of our movement systems are very anorexic. They lack so many of the nutritional qualities that fascia wants that people haven't even really gotten the sense of like, have you ever like been so dehydrated from your 2-hour workouts and then you like drink some electrolytes and within 30, maybe even 15 minutes, your body just starts like buzzing and coming back online and like having this move. There is a quality of movement, and that's what I do. It's called GST. And there's this whole system that's derived around fascia, for fascia, and it is this feel good. It's this highly nutritious, densely like packed experience that also helps with, we won't go into that because we could go down a rabbit hole in terms of just mental.
For everybody listening, this is what I'm gathering from this, because, when I work out, I love doing my weight workout and all that, but in between my sets, I'll go over to the treadmill and I'll grab it and I'll stretch, or I'm constantly, I'm on the rebounder in between sets, or I'm stretching it or like, let's say you're watching TV and you start taking your wrists and doing, 360, the other way, or you do that with your feet or whatever. I'm constantly, because you got the ADHD, so I constantly need to move, and to feel like I'm moving, and I from what I'm gathering, you're saying, look, it's not as simple as just saying constantly move, but find different ways to open movements to constantly pepper your whole day with open movements that are expanding you rather than contrasting you. That's one little takeaway that I would say.
That was a great synopsis. That's great.
And I guess, to look at that to where it's like, you're not being obsessive, because I worry about that, sometimes I was like, I'm constantly moving. My friends are over the house and it's like, after a party or something, and I'm moving and they're like, calm down. And I'm like, this is what I need to do. This is my process, so I need to keep going, and thinking about what you're saying is like, look, get creative on open movements. It's healthy. It's a healthy lifestyle.
It's so much better. They have this concept in nutrition too, that's called bioavailable, right? How bioavailable is the supplement you're taking? Just because it has vitamin C in the pill doesn't mean your body knows what to do with it. Okay. And there's different grades of vitamin C, things that are synthetic, things that have like, there's a gamut, and I won't even go into it, but it's called bioavailability. And it's like, how much is your body able to take and extract the goodness from that? And I apply this idea not just to physical movement, not just to diet, but even our lives, like this experience, how bioavailable, how much life force is in it? How life-giving is this? And I feel like people need to start asking their questions in life in general, of like, is this giving me life? Is this taking it away? Is this restoring my energy levels, or is this depleting them? Is this relationship? Is this business venture? Is this, office job I'm having? What is the bioavailability? And so I'm repeating what you're saying, which is basically is like stretching, microdosing is always better for the body. The body doesn't get overwhelmed. Like all of these principles that people already know about, they just need to change the lens and start thinking of it from how they're approaching movement, because we bankrupted our concept of movement, which you guys call fitness. But
that you mentioned that as we're sitting here on a podcast, that reminds me of, and it's going back to ADHD, is that the more you do this, the more your body's open to accept more. And it's interesting because when I was younger, I couldn't you'd ask somebody, wait, what did you just say? Because I couldn't concentrate on what they were saying. But then I got into stand-up comedy, got into improv. You have to listen in order to react,
That's right.
and podcasting, which I do quite a bit of, to where you're like, have to listen moment to moment what the person's saying. And then, your muscle gets worked on, retention and comprehension and what the person, and your moment to moment of absorbing what they're saying, as to where the muscle's totally different. I don't think that, you can't do something like that and not pick up that skill set, even for people say that have, I say quotes, with ADHD, because I don't believe that there's, I believe things can change, to where you could work on anything, maybe predisposed or something, but, so it's almost like you're saying that you can have, your body, once you do X, Y, and Z, it's going to be more, you'll be able to absorb your vitamins and minerals better because of you're doing X, Y, and Z.
Right away. That's a great example. If your viscera, which is the fascia that surrounds your organs, is completely restricted by your abs, by your tensions in your diaphragm, you are not processing your food. Here's a perfect example. When you eat a bite of food, your esophagus begins to contract at the same synchronicity with your organs, down even to the end of your colon. And this synchronicity is controlled by fascia. So when your food is moving along your intestinal tract, being extracted for your nutrients, it is heavily dependent upon the state of health of your fascia. So if you reverse engineer that, just knowing that, and you keep doing all of the crunches to try to vice and like set down and have the hardest core ever, you're inversely causing damage, and you're not going to extract your nutrients. You will get colitis. You will get like gastrointestinal problems. Crohn's disease can have flare-ups because people's viscera doesn't move correctly, right? And so this is what I mean. It like applies to so many different areas of health, but that's true. That is 100% true, that this is what I love about fascia, is like if you address one thing, it really affects it all. That's what, like, it's so bioavailable. Just make sure that you're healthy. Like, I think it's funny. Sometimes I consider, like, what if the gods had left us to control our heartbeat and control our lung, like breathing patterns, and we would have fucked it up. So 90% of your body is on an autonomic nervous system regulation. What's really powerful about fascia is that it's venerated, which just means it's interactive into your somatic. So by controlling fascia on your somatic nervous system means I can control it. Like my muscles, I choose to blink my eyes, I choose to swallow, those are more somatic movements that you can control. Because fascia works in somatic, but has autonomic control. You can actually influence autonomic functions that were not previously accessible, right? This is why you can heal things using fascia that doesn't it's not medicinal. You don't have to take pills, but you have to do something about it, right? Like you have to be able to say, I want to do this. So it makes you more held responsible to invest in your own wellness rather than relying on someone else to just fix it for you. And I think that comes down to back to entrepreneurship. I was thinking that's the point of all of life, is learn how to, adultify, become an adult and take interest in your well-being and your other people's well-being. And, part of the love of life is being able to take ownership rather than, not my fault, I didn't do that, give me a medicine. No. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's passively, attending to life.
Well, let's do, as we come to a close here, went a little bit over, I really enjoyed, I could tell that you and I would be, this could be a 5-hour conversation. So let's do a top 5. What are the top 5 components to practice good fascia? Or, what you do? What are the top 5? If you had to tell layman's, people listening, what are the top 5 things to be cognitive of as far as fascia?
First thing, fascia is your organ of consciousness. It's listening and feeling and sensing everything. So you have to climb inside your skin that you're in. You have to be willing to go inside, which is what they say, connecting to yourself, right? And letting this master organ be able to bring you closer to your sense of true, your sense of right, your sense of, north, your north star. And so fascia first has to be listened to. And that is easy if you have pain like I did and like your wife does. It's a little bit less until you're in your 40s, and then most people have some type of body problem. But listen to you, get to know you better. So that's the first. The second is that you have to be able to understand that stress and load are a part of life. You want to be able to be a master, a Jedi master at moving your energies, right? Don't let them come in and sit on you. Don't become stale and static. Find a way to be able to spread and reach and expand yourself as a metabolic process. How quickly you can metabolize the stresses of life determine how vital you are as a human, how healthy and joyful you are in your brain. I think another pillar or the top 5 would be playful, right? That includes doing movement that is fun. You do it because of the sensations you get from it, because of the joy of being in that moment, because you know that it's a joyful place. I think that's why kids are so joyful, is that movement actually instills a sense of deep play and a deep fun. And we kind of, as grown-ups especially, lose our sense of play. And so that's, talk about the psychosomatic. If you just learn to play inside your movement, you will be amazed at how much your mental health improves. You don't need to have Xanax and antidepressants and anti-anxiety and movement. There's a book out there. I wish I always had the author's name, but it's called The Happy Pill. And it's this guy who's like literally talking about movement and what it does neurologically to create, mental health changes. And it's really powerful. And so I would say that that's number 4, playful. And then I think the last top 5 would be this is more of a psychological thing, but I feel like it balances out going internally. It's like, fascia teaches you, like, let yourself be stretched. Let yourself be expanded. Look for opportunities to push beyond. When you'll start to see, if you work in fascia, you'll start to see how much your mind contracts. You'll hear something that's political and you just kind of grab around it, and then it makes you, or you're with your kids and you hear your daughter like completely insulting you, and you just hear your mind, you'll feel your mind contract and restrict. And that is a protective required mechanism to keep us alive. But if you live in it, it is completely like imprisoning. And it completely restricts your emotional, social, spiritual freedom. And so look at your life and be like, what do I contract around? What am I rigid about? What am I like defensive towards? And then all of a sudden you go, how can I spread this? How can I open this? How can I reach to greater places? How can I explore areas that feel dark and make them lighter, both lightness of weight and lightness of incandescence? And so I think that conclusion of those kind of 5 things has you stepping more into a state of joy, of being human being rather than a human doing, where we're just like always trying to achieve and done. It's like, what about this moment that I'm in with you? I have to compliment you. You're an exceptional listener, and you actually ask me things based upon interest. And it's a pleasure to be in communion with someone who has that, right?
I get this. I'm a personal development person, but all this makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. All this is, what my takeaway is that, well, I'll be, of course I'll do a deep dive, the next day or 2 on fascia, and then I'll look in deeper into you. And then, what I will remember is, as I'm doing the nuts and bolts of my days, I will be, okay, what new movement, stretching, non-rigid movement can I do right now that I don't normally do? And how can I move my body that feels good and constantly evolving into, this type of beautiful Tai Chi thing. Every new move is like, oh, I've never moved that way. And that feels good to do that. Maybe I'll do that more often, and that will make my body feel better. It'll make, and I'll think of you when I do it.
Thank you. I would love to be thought of. And that's a great takeaway.
Yeah. I think this is the beauty of podcasting, guys, is that you get to really get to meet a lot of interesting people. And you are one of them. Tell everybody how they could find out more about you. And I would be talking to you more if I didn't have the last episode of the day with but Anna, you're the penultimate episode of the day. So tell Anna
Thank
Rahe.
you. That was very kind.
Anna Rahe, tell everybody how they can find out more about you.
Why don't you go to, I have a website called annarahe.com, but my name is spelled kind of weird. It's Rahe. You can remember it phonetically, but you'll put the notes in the show notes, right? Or something so people can find it.
Your own page on our website and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I do is called GST. And it's very, don't ask about it, the name. I won't even go into it. I was 18 when it came about. I would do it very differently now. But GST, if you're British, is goods and sales tax. Sometimes I try to just throw acronyms out there so people know where to find it. And it really is this kind of an evolved way of going in and doing it. So you can find free videos on my YouTube channel. You can go to gstbody.com or find me on my own website. They're connected, and just read about it and go do a deep dive, because I think that it will radically change your life, not just physically health, but also these other beautiful things that if people are wanting to learn how to manage stress and, cultivate their own internal connection or get direction and have a sense of who they are. And fascia just opportunistically provides so many benefits. So.
Yeah, this is what been wonderful. I'm glad you're part of my peer group now, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful conversation. Super inspiring.
Thanks for joining us. Gear up for your next adventure and head over to bolator.com to check out the amazing Bolo Pack and their other innovative outdoor gear. Catch you next time.